Welcome. Have you heard of ODATT? Let me clear my throat really fast. ODATT, aka one day at a time. It's a staple phrase in the recovery community, and I know that phrase has helped me many times to slow down, to be in the moment, sometimes to not lose my freaking mind. I'm sure you can feel me there. ODATT is also a podcast, the ODATT Chat Podcast, and we're going to talk with the creator and host here in just a minute. Really excited to do that. We got some great things coming at you. But first, this episode of the podcast is brought to you by Promises Behavioral Health. If you're struggling through the pains of addiction or a mental health disorder, now's the time to seek some help. Maybe it's affected your job, your social life, a relationship. There's a lot going on right now. I know there's a lot of people struggling out there, including myself at times. It's like this roller coaster of emotions, and it's constant. And the more that I've realized, it's not so much, for me at least, about being super, super difficult to not pick up and drink. It's actually super, super difficult to apply the principles of recovery to my damn reality these days. That seems to be the issue. So here's what I'm getting at. We have some resources. We have some options for you. You're not alone, number one, biggest thing. And Promises Behavioral Health, we partnered with the team there for a couple of years now in working together. I know them well. They have family, they have friends in recovery, and they're great people. Let me give you some options on how you can reach out to them for yourself or for your family member. You can go to promisesbehavioralhealth.com/soberguy. They created a great webpage over there. It's got some pictures of our family just to represent that families can recover, that can be in recovery and live fruitful, better lives. So one more time, that's promisesbehavioralhealth.com/soberguy, or you can just pick up the old telephone, the old cell phone, call 888-205-1890. Tell them that you heard about them from That Sober Guy podcast. Ask some questions, get some information. One more time, that's 888-205-1890. And you can do that there. Yeah, check them out. They're good people. Shout out to them, to Promises, of course. All right, a couple more things, then we're going to jump into today's episode. You can go to thatsoberguy.com. We got hats, hoodies, t-shirts, how to navigate the first 90 days of sobriety digital course. And of course, if you need some help, you can click on the Get Help tab there. You can find all kinds of resources. One of them in particular, I think I said that correctly, the Fourth Dimensions online AA Zoom meeting. It's 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific. It's every single night. I believe Saturdays they have a speaker meeting. So if you're looking for a meeting, if you need to get plugged in somewhere, it's really a great place to start. And you can go on the Get Help tab at thatsoberguy.com. It'll give you all the login info there. One last thing, I want to thank Americana Fest, Thriving Roots Music Festival, for the great panel discussion we recently did about musicians in recovery. So a shout out to them. Shout out to Promises for helping to sponsor that panel. It was good times and always fun. So thank you again. All right, I'm glad you're here today. Sit back, grab something to drink, something to eat. We're going to have a little bit of some fun today and talk some recovery. Let's get the show on the road.
That Sober Guy podcast contains adult content, merciless truth, and emotional nudity. Listener discretion is advised.
I'm Shane Raymer. You're listening to That Sober Guy podcast, and we help people stay sober. It's good to be here. You can check us out at thatsoberguy.com. You can connect with us on Instagram at RealThatSoberGuy, on Twitter at Shane Raymer. This is the Humans music if you're interested. I've actually had a couple of emails lately. What's that intro music you're listening to? That's Humans. My boy Robbie. They're from Canada, and they got some good jams, so you can check them out. Humansmusic.com, Spotify, iTunes, all that good stuff. Our guest today is Arlina Allen, and Arlina is the creator and host of the ODATT Chat Podcast. I'm sure many of you have listened to it before. She's also been clean and sober since April 23rd, 1994, straight OG of the recovery community. So I'm super pumped to have her on today. Arlina, it's very nice to see you. Welcome to the podcast.
Oh my God, thank you for having me. I love your intro music. That's amazing.
Yeah, Humans have some good jams. They have all kinds of good stuff. A couple of them, yeah. What's going on with you? How are you? It's great to finally have you on the podcast. We've been chatting a bit.
Oh my gosh. I'm so excited to be here. So it was so funny when I was listening to your intro. Yeah, I don't know if you remember this, and we briefly connected about this, but when I first started my podcast, I reached out to you because I was listening to all these other podcasts. I reached out to you and you gave me some encouragement, and I was so grateful, and it really just kind of inspired me to just jump in.
Yeah.
And so when I started doing my intro, I had something a little similar to yours where it was like a guy being like, oh, emotional, like that whole thing.
Yeah.
For the longest time, I was like, I'm just going to copy Shane because he's amazing.
The form of what's the saying? That's flattery or something like that. So I don't.
Yeah,
that is
flattery
awesome.
is this imitation is the sincerest form of flattery.
There it is.
So,
yes, I love it. Well, I'm glad I could help, and I actually went back and I was looking through some of those old emails. I think they were from 2017, if I remember right. And of you just reaching out. You actually reached out through the form, I think, on Sober Guy, and then we briefly chatted. You were getting ready to launch, and I guess we should give a shout out to Dennis, right? Who kind of once again now rekindled this connection here. Dennis, what's Dennis's last name again? Is it Barry? Barry, yeah, Dennis Barry. Yeah, so shout out to Dennis. He kind of helped connect us again.
The Funky Brain podcast.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, oh, you need to talk to Shane. And at first I was a little like, bitch, I already know Shane.
What you mean, fool? Yeah.
I'm always talking to you. You don't know who I am. But then the timing was so crazy because I live in Idaho. Is it okay to say? Like were like thinking about coming out to Idaho, and you were like, and so we hadn't spoken in like 4 years. I'm like 121 episodes in at this point. But it was so crazy because Dennis was like, hey, talk to Shane. And then when we connected, I was actually touring a friend. We were looking at houses for her. Yeah. And you were like, yeah, I'm coming out there to look at houses. And I nearly fell out of my chair. I was like, can only be explained as a God thing. Because
totally.
You know what I mean?
I was going to say, it doesn't happen by accident. And God's timing always seems to be perfect when we allow it to just kind of roll out like that. So yeah, I went back actually later that day and I said, hey, I told Jess, I was like, because you know how when you're kind of trying to step out into stuff, sometimes if you're kind of aware of it, you get these signs, or at least you think they're signs. I don't know. I mean, I tend to follow that way. Like, well, this or that or whatever. And then when I spoke with you after that day, I'm like, you're in Idaho? Wait, we're coming out there next. So, I mean, yeah, it was one of those things that was kind of odd and kind of cool. Yeah. So how do you like Idaho, by the way?
Dude, can I swear?
Yeah, feel free.
I fucking love it out here.
And you're originally from San Jose, right?
I am from San Jose. Yeah. And, everyone there's like this, I feel like I'm in the San Jose refugee camp out here. And it's like the California refugee camp. Like everybody's leaving and everyone kept telling me, oh, you're going to love it. You're going to love it. And I was like, oh, I hope so. I am happier than I had dared hope to be.
Really?
Like that's how good it is. And it was almost as if like the fantasy bubble of California lifestyle kind of was burst. Cause I didn't realize it, but I kind of had always had like this internal pride of like, oh, I'm a California native, born and raised in Sunnyvale. Like it doesn't get any more California than that. Right. Yeah. And, but then so there was like a little bit of fear. Like I didn't know what life was going to be like out here, but I mean, it's amazing. I feel safe. Yeah. I feel I have some space. I sold my little 960 square foot house that I've been living in with my two boys, my husband for 16 years, sold it for over $1 million.
It's insane.
And bought this giant ass house out here, a custom built home out here in Idaho. And dude, we are living the dream.
Yeah.
Living the dream. So come on out. Come on in. The water's fine.
Well, I know. And it is tough though too. You mentioned like, you're born and raised, like same with Jess and I, we're born and raised here. I moved around a little bit when I was younger before we were married, but it wasn't anything crazy. And this is all we know, and there's so many things that have changed out here. It's not the place that we grew up in. And it's really tough, obviously, to predict the future. But at the same time, it's kind of easy to see at least right now, where some things are headed, and it just doesn't seem like a great place right now for us, at least. And this is strictly, this is coming from me, my opinion. Everyone's entitled to their own, but for our family, it doesn't seem like it is going to be a great play. Our kids are young still, 6 and 10, so
Dude, it's time to go.
yeah. So we're thinking about it, definitely. So,
well, you know how it is. It's like once you make a big change, you want everybody else to make it too.
Oh yeah. Well, no, and I've kind of like seen like too, like I was thinking about this. Have you ever heard like the analogy of the boiling pot of water and the frog or whatever?
Oh yeah, the frog doesn't notice.
Yeah, he doesn't notice. Yeah. Like if you throw a frog, which is I hate that analogy too. It's terrible. I'm an animal lover. Gross. Yeah, it's kind of nasty. But like if you throw him in a boiling pot of water, he's gonna like flip out.
No, it's. You put him in the pot before it's boiling.
Yeah, he's not going to know he's dying. And so I feel like that's kind of how it's been in California for us, is like we've been here for so long. We've just grown accustomed to this like overwhelming, like high priced taxes and just crazy ass stuff going on. I'm not even going to go into all that right now, but you know what I'm saying? It's just insane. So it might be time for a change. Who knows? We'll see what happens.
I tell you what, life is good out here. I feel a peace and a sense of ease that I don't think I had ever felt at home, back home. So the one thing about, we're in recovery, right? And when you move, I'm sure you've experienced this in your own recovery community. Like when you move, everyone says how difficult it is to, find a new tribe, or to feel like they're doing, like everyone says, wherever you get sober, that's how they're doing it right. And then whenever you leave, it's like, oh, they don't do it right. And I got to tell you, I walked into my first 12-step meeting and I sat there and they started reading out of the book, and a sense of peace and calm came over my heart. And I was like, I'm going to be just fine.
Yeah.
Because the principles are still, principles are still the same.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, and you find, I think that's one thing I love about the recovery community in general, is you can go anywhere and you can find your people. You know what I mean? You can find some good people who speak your language, I guess, been through some of the things that you've been through, and relate to that. So how is let me ask that then, how is the recovery community when you moved? Did you find it was pretty easy to get dialed in?
They don't do it right here.
Of course not. They don't do it the way I think it should be done.
Yeah. That's funny. But so there was a couple of anticipated challenges, right? Yeah. So the first anticipated challenge was that the format was going to be different and I would have to get used to it. I knew that going in. Knowing it and feeling it are two different things.
Yeah.
And the other anticipated challenge was, I heard from other people, like when they moved to, like when I was in San Jose and new people would come in, people with time, everyone thinks, oh, you're okay. Like they treat them very differently than somebody that's a newcomer to recovery in general, right? Like everyone just assumes you're fine. Oh, I don't have to reach out to that person, whatever. And so I knew it was going to be on me to do all of the outreach in the beginning. And I'm in sales by profession, high tech corporate sales. I'm an account executive for a high tech company. So I'm accustomed to doing outreach, but it was still hard. It's still, there's that little poor me voice that pops off every once in a while that says, how come I'm the only one that has to reach out? How come these motherfuckers aren't calling me?
Yeah.
What's wrong with you people? Don't you know who I am?
You just reminded me of pour me another one.
Drink. Yeah.
Or something. Yeah. I always remember that one.
Listen, the bedoublements on page 60, I think it's on page 65. I'm going to act like I know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
But it's all about I do have to stay vigilant about self-centeredness, self-seeking, self-pity, like divorce my thinking from those things, because that's my default. I default even after all this time. That's just my default, and that's fine. But I just have to be very mindful of it.
No, and I think that's a really good point, and that's kind of what I was getting at earlier. And I've actually been on that for a couple of weeks, or probably a week or two now. Is just that. So I just had 7 years on the 11th.
I saw that. Yeah, congratulations.
I appreciate that. Thank you very much. And the drinking aspect of it, I still stay vigilant with it. Okay. Of course, I know that it's there and that it could creep up anytime and bite me in the ass, but like, it's not so hard for me not to drink anymore. It's just really hard to do just what you were talking about. Like, watch out for the self-seeking motives and the selfishness, and like just really dealing with life, like in general. That is like, especially right now, going through all the crap that we're seeing happening right before our eyes.
Emotional sobriety.
Yeah. It's just, it is. And so it's a constant effort, I guess, is what I'm getting at. And how have you been kind of dealing with some of that stuff? I mean, has it affected you? Like, what are your thoughts on that?
I wrestle with it for sure. But so I am completely committed to this idea of what you think about, you bring about, and to focus on what you do want, not what you don't want. Right? It's like, be the change you want to see, that kind of a thing.
Yeah.
So I am aware, but I would love to say that I don't get hooked. I would love to say I don't engage.
Yeah.
Especially in this political climate, the challenge and the thing to remember, and the thing that I hold on to, is that we are more alike than we are different. We are more alike. And it's so easy to get, I'm so rebellious. I refuse to get sucked into fear. I'm like, fuck the fear. Let's focus on what really matters.
Yeah.
What really matters is that you and I care about each other. What matters is that we are doing our own work, that we are practicing the principles in all our affairs, and to come together, and I respect everybody's opinions, and I don't always agree, but respect, I think the Latin root of respect means to think again. And so even if I don't agree with somebody, I am willing, because it takes grit to be like, okay, let me try to see it from their point of view.
Yeah.
Let me just try for a second to see it from their point of view, and then fucking let that shit go. If it doesn't resonate, that's fine. But we are more alike than we are different. And at the end of the day, I'm not going to give in to the fear, because it just takes me to a place that I don't like to feel. I'm such a junkie of feeling good. So focus on what you do want to feel, focus on what you do want to cultivate. And I'm not saying to bury your head in the sand, but especially with like emotional sobriety, I think it's so important, because, even after all this time of being sober, I do have those negative feelings, and it's so easy to fall into the old mental trap of guilt and shame and like all those negative things. And so I think it's important to acknowledge reality, process your feelings to resolution, and then focus on what you want to create, not defend against what you don't want. Right? It seems like such a waste of energy. Yeah,
that's good. Yeah, the fear, the uncertainty and the fear is big right now for so many people, both inside recovery and outside, I think, just in general.
Dude, it's a human experience.
Yeah. And if you're right, if you give into it, I mean, it literally can take over your life. And none of us are perfect at it by any, I mean, I know I'm not. It's
dude,
it has its days, but like at the end of the day, if I'm kind of staying in the moment, and I think kind of what you were getting at was just staying in gratitude too. Like, man, I got a pretty damn good life. You know what I mean? Like a lot of things to be grateful for. So I think that's the right attitude.
You've cultivated an amazing life for yourself and your family. Look how far you've come. 7 years. 7 is a magical number. This is going to be an amazing year. You're like on the cusp of all this. You're on the cusp of magic that you can't even grasp right now. It's going to be a great year for you.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah.
What, let's go back to April 23rd, 1994 and shift gears a little bit here. What,
That's so old I could barely remember.
I mean, you have some time, you have some time. What was, let's do this. Give us a little look into what Arlina's life was like prior to April 23rd, 1994, and then take us into that day specific.
Do you want to know my funny little way of encapsulating my whole using experience? If it was in a bottle, a bag, or blue jeans, I was doing it.
That's it. Easy as that. It's like a buffet.
That's the whole thing.
It's like a buffet.
Yeah. I mean, that's a funny way. I always, I turn my shame into humor.
It's good. It's a good way to do it.
That's how I cope. No, but I come from a really nice family. Like there was no real reason for me to behave so badly. But, Daddy's from Kentucky. My mother was born and raised in Mexico City. So there was a lot of praise Jesus and ay Dios mío, gracias a Dios in my house growing up.
Love it.
My dad was a military man. He was in the Marines. So I grew up with things like there is no early. You are either on time or late. And, late was not acceptable, FYI. Hence the compulsive early attendance to everything.
10, 15 minutes at least.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Like I can't help myself. It's ridiculous. I mean, I am like, oh girl, you look so overeager all the time. You're always early. Yeah. Can't you be cool and be late?
Can't you be late?
No. Apparently not. But no, my parents were very nice people. They did not exhibit drinking and using behavior. I grew up in the church, but some things happened to me when I was really young. I experienced sexual abuse when I was really little, and my parents divorced, and those were the two pivotal experiences of my childhood. It affected who I believed I was. It affected my self-worth. Those experiences fundamentally altered the course of my life. And I couldn't articulate as a small child what was happening to me or how I felt about myself. But, growing up in the church, I sort of got this idea of perfectionism, and I was never able to live up to those ideals that I was being taught. And I failed over and over and over again. And even though the basic premise was you are forgiven, I was never able to receive that message. I felt to my core that I was bad. And I used to joke around that at some point I decided if I couldn't be good, I was going to be good at being bad. And as it turns out, is a lot of fun. But the core of that statement is that I'm bad. And I didn't even realize how subconscious that idea was planted into my psyche until many years of recovery. It took a long time for me I knew in the very beginning of recovery that my core issue was not good enough, but I didn't take it that one step further to acknowledge that it was coming from a place that I thought I was bad. Yeah. So that was sort of like what caused me to drink, because I took my first drink before I was 10. It was between 8 and 10.
Dang, that's young.
Yeah, so young. And I look back and I feel so sad for my little girl self that I felt the need to do that. But my mom had gone out on a date, and my older sister and I were left home alone. And she was the good, compliant child. She got good grades and was compliant. I was not. I needed to maintain balance in the house, right? So I didn't know that that's what I was doing, but I was like, oh, the role of good girl is taken. I guess I'll go have some fun. But that first drink, I think I was I think I was closer to 8, because my mom had met my stepdad before I was 10. So it was before 10. But I remember that first drink, how it burned my lips. And then it burned my mouth. It burned all the way down until it hit bottom. And then once it hit bottom, that warmth that spread through my whole body. And those feelings of self-consciousness, self-hatred, self-loathing, those were all lifted. And suddenly I was left with this contrasting experience that was so dramatic. It like burned itself in my psyche forever. And that was that I felt good. And I didn't realize how good I felt until I didn't really realize how bad I felt until I felt good from that first drink. And I chased that feeling for the rest of my life, it seems like.
Yeah. It's, you talk about that warm feeling, everything just kind of floats away. And then you think that's, okay, great. I always want to feel like this, It's amazing too, like how much those of us in recovery, when we go back and look at our past, our childhood, how many of us suffered from some sort of trauma or abuse, and it always, I mean, not always, but a lot of the time it's those things that this type of thinking, this want to escape, reality, all that kind of stuff stems from. And it's not really until we take a look at those, which is not an easy thing to do, that we start to find some healing in that. So how did you get sober? Like, what was that like? Like, where did that get to, that final day where you decided I'm done?
Yeah. So it was a long journey between that first drink and my last. I took my last drink at the, you may be familiar with the Saddle Rack in San Jose.
Oh yeah. I have heard. Yeah.
Love me some Cowboys. Yeah. Hence the Blue Jays. Always trying to alter how I felt one way or another. So my recovery journey sort of started, like my bottom was when I was out with my sister one night, and I had a really bad experience with her. I physically hurt my sister. I hesitate to say we got in a fight because it wasn't really a fight. I had gotten really drunk and she was trying to get me home, and I had this little truck and she was driving my car, and we drove past. I had been dating a DUI cop, which was kind of funny. Side note, I never got a DUI because I used to give his business card with my driver's license when I would get pulled over, and they would let me go.
Here you go. I'm with so-and-so. Dang,
isn't that crazy?
Pulling the strings.
And they would let me go. Wow. So anyway, but he and I had broke up partially because he was married. But
whole nother story.
I mean, listen, the only married man I date now is my husband.
There you go. That's all that matters is now, not the past, okay?
Not the past, yeah. Listen, I have no shame in my game. Yeah. But anyway, so my sister was trying to get me home, and she was driving my car, and we drove past my, ex-boyfriend giving a field sobriety test to somebody else. And apparently I lost my damn mind, and it was trying to crash her car while she was driving it. And
dang.
This is all secondhand information, by the way. She said I kicked her in the face while she was driving, and she was able to pull the car over and run we were almost made it home, ran to the neighbor's house and got them. And I don't know what happened. I know the police were involved. I didn't go to jail. I don't know why, but I woke up the next morning with that terrible, incomprehensible demoralization that we talk about.
Yeah.
And that's when I started questioning my drinking. And it took me 2 years of questioning my drinking before I was able to get sober, because there was not, 26 years ago, there was not, that would be 28 years ago, right? Because it took me 2 years of the contemplation. It's like the only options at that time was AA or rehab. And I didn't even know about rehab. Yeah. I did know about AA because my mom dated somebody that was in the program when I was 14 years old, and he's still sober, believe it or not. I see him at meetings. It's crazy. But it took me 2 years of wrestling with that idea because it was the one thing that was helping me. It was like the one thing that kept me alive during those young years. Like I was self-medicating because I had so much self-hatred, like all the drugs that saved my life. Because if I had to feel everything that I was feeling, I don't know that I would have survived it, but the drugs and alcohol actually helped me. But the savior became the executioner towards the end, and I just could not go on anymore. And I finally gave in. And two of my customers, I was in an outside sales position even then, and two of my customers were in the program, Mitch and Randy. And I will be forever grateful to those two guys because they sort of introduced me to some ideas about the program. And then one even took me to my very first meeting, and then they sort of like handed me over to the women. They were like, the women work with the women. Like they were fine, upstanding members of the program. And they, kind of Eskimoed me in out of the cold and handed me off to the women, and the rest is history.
It's awesome. You said one word that kind of stuck out, and I feel like there's someone who might need to hear this right now. Like you said, contemplation. So like that that contemplating, or should I say those contemplating voices that sometimes go back and forth in our heads, like, you got this, you don't need help. No, you need to get some help. You need to go right now. You're going to die. You're going to live. You're great. Like it can really be overwhelming at times. So I was hoping maybe you could share a little bit about just what that contemplation was like for you. And maybe you can help relate to someone out there who's going and just like, man, I know I need some help, but I'm not really sure, like, if I need some help, but I know I do. You know what I mean? That whole back and forth thing. Like, what was that like for you, that piece of it?
It was torture. That's such a great question, though, Shane. I'm so glad you asked that. At that period of time was torture for me, because the question started because my sister went to Al-Anon after that night. And I was like, for me, you went to Al-Anon because of me? What? Yeah. Like, I was surprised. I was so self-centered, but incapable of self-examination. Like, I could not see myself clearly. I did not see myself the way other people saw me from the outside. But that contemplation period, that 2-year period was just freaking torture, because it was, am I an alcoholic? What makes somebody an alcoholic? Well, all these other people around me are drinking just like I am. Are they alcoholic? Why am I different? Like, the one question led to another, which led to more questions. It was like opening Pandora's box. But it was that first time I started that internal investigation of, is my drinking a problem? And I tried to solve that. I tried to think my way into right living. Right. And I got to the program later, and it turns out the solution is the opposite. You live your way into right thinking. But I didn't know that. So I spent those 2 years, I spent a lot of time in the self-help section at Barnes & Noble. I thought my problem was men. I thought my problem was money. I thought my problem was that I needed 6-pack abs. I mean, it was ridiculous what I thought my problem was. And I kept coming back to this idea of, well, you know, when did I cross the line? Did I cross the line? I didn't understand this whole idea about alcoholism. So it took me 2 years of wrestling with that idea, and then just getting beat up, frankly, by just trying to manage it. Like, I tried the glass of water between drinks. I tried switching from hard alcohol to beer and wine. I tried all the things. I shot all the angles until I was just sick and tired of being sick and tired. And these guys are like, Mitch and Randy were like, come over here. We have the answer. Yeah. So I just gave it up smooth finally.
That's like, you finally just throw your hands up just in complete exhaustion at some point, because it's like, gosh, nothing is working. So April 23rd, 1994 for you. That's just like, I can't believe that. So that's
it took me 60 days to get 30.
Mm-hmm. So you went back and forth a little bit. And so let me point this out, folks listening too, is number one, this shit's not easy. Okay. But not to deter you, you know, cause I get many emails and messages, man, I had 2 weeks, I had, 60 days. Here's the bottom line. Myself, Arlina, so many others of us out there, we didn't give up. We kept going. We only lose when we quit, like straight up. And so even if you had 3 weeks and you messed up and you went back out again, don't give up, because that's when you lose. Like, you have to get back on, and eventually it will click. It's different for everybody. You know what I'm saying? So sorry, I just wanted to throw that in there, but
no, that's a really important point. Yeah. It actually brings up something that kind of bothers me about certain programs, is this marking of time, because it is marking time by default, engenders failure. Right. Yeah. And so sometimes, I mean, it's the only program that it's almost like it's just this idea of perfectionism, right? Yeah. And it took me 2 years of wrestling with the ideas. Like, there wasn't like a lot of information that long ago. You know what I'm saying? I failed and failed and failed and failed and failed. But I showed up to a program, and then I started marking my time. And I realized, so the funny thing was I quit drinking on my 25th birthday, but I didn't show up to a 12-step program for 5 months.
Really?
But I was on the marijuana maintenance program, and I didn't know.
That's sick of weed.
Right? I didn't know you couldn't count your time. So I showed up to this meeting thinking, I've been sober for 5 months. They're like, no.
Yeah.
You have to be. And the reason is because the whole point of recovery is that we're trying to recover our whole selves. And I had spent so much time and energy disassociating from my feelings out of survival, right? I was trying to survive, Shane. I was trying to, and a part of me was trying to survive. But when I got sober and I quit everything, I was like this raw nerve ending, and I felt everything, which was totally overwhelming. But I had community all for the first time.
Yeah.
I had community and support and a process to sort through all my feelings. Like I never had any kind of coping mechanisms before that.
Yeah.
Right. And working steps in a 12-step program was a way for me to actually, like the 4-step was magical. It was the first time I was able to see myself clearly, that I was the cause, not at the effect of life. Right.
Yeah.
Like I thought I was a victim. Turns out I was kind of an asshole. people were just responding to me being a self-centered dick.
posing as the victim. You know, I've said that so many times, like that victim mentality just destroyed me for many years, and it destroys so many of us staying in that state. We can never grow. Everything is everyone else's fault. And it's hard. We can't really figure that out until someone points it out to us, or we figure it out ourselves. Let me ask you this too. So what would you say to somebody who, let's see, how do I say this? A lot of the time I get questions or thoughts like there's like this magic answer, just, oh, you just get sober. It's like, there's more to it than that. You got to show up. You got to be able to put in some work. A lot of people, due to stigma or whatever you want to call it, they won't go to a 12-step meeting. They won't check it out because maybe they've had a bad, someone told them a bad thing about it. There was a bad experience about it. Was that something for you that you experienced? Was it hard for you to get into the meeting, or were you just so exhausted? You just like, I'm willing to try anything at this point?
I loved it from day one. And I know that that's not everybody's experience. I remember the women pulling me aside. I was 25 years old. I was blonde, very skinny. Everyone thought I was doing other drugs. Anyway, that's beside the point. But the women would pull me aside and be like, watch out for the wolves in sheep's clothing, right? So there it tells you it's not always a safe place, which is, I've seen, and now I understand why they say that the women work with the women now. However, that was the last block on the house for me. Like there was no other option for me. Like I was going to die. I was going to die. And so I was so desperate. I was willing to do anything they told me to do, including working with the women. Like women were not my, I saw women as competition. I did not have a good relationship with my mother. And so I did not see women as a safe place. And I was terrified of women. I was I spent all my time and energy decorating the outside. I didn't feel like I had anything on the inside. And they told me that I had to work with the women. I was so desperate to be sober, Shane. I did everything they told me to do, including working with the women. And, so I had a really good experience, and it makes me sad that other people do not, but there are more options now than there used to be. But for me, I was just willing to do whatever they told me to do. Like I worked the steps with the same intensity that I sought drugs and alcohol. And for me, it was all about cause and effect, and I had a really good outcome.
So let's kind of shift then into what sobriety has given you. Like, what's your life like today? What does that look like? And like, it seems pretty amazing probably when you look back and think like, man, where it could have went, where it was going, and like, how the heck did I get here today?
Yeah, so life is really good. So my husband and I have been together. So I was 5 months sober when he and I met and started dating. Again, rebel. I don't follow. I guess maybe I didn't follow all the rules, but I did all the steps. But I mean, so far so good. My older boy is 20 and my younger son is 16. They have never seen me loaded. I'm a good sponsor. I'm more me than I've ever been. And I love who I am today, not like I'm better than anybody. you know what I mean? It's like we're in a circle, not on a ladder.
Yeah,
like I'm not
that's a good way to put
ahead.
it.
Like I don't feel I am any more exempt from alcohol than the person has one day. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's
Yep.
like I'm still vulnerable if I don't take care of myself. It's like a plant. It's like you have to water the plant every day if you want to keep it alive. Like you wouldn't go to the gym once and expect to be in shape forever.
Yeah, it doesn't
right?
work like
so
that.
taking care of my recovery, it's like or like a diabetic. It's like a diabetic needs to take their medicine, otherwise they're going to get sick again.
Yeah.
And that's definitely the case for me. If I stop taking my medicine, I get sick very quickly. I forgot what your question was. I was rambling.
No, you're
Did
good.
I answer your question?
I was just kind of asking, just, sharing a little bit about what sobriety brought you and kind of where it was today.
Yeah.
And
I got all the stuff.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like the marriage, the kids, the money in the bank, the lifestyle is good. I'm healthy. But more importantly, I love who I am. My relationships with my family is really good. I have healthy relationships with other women. I feel like my life has purpose and meaning. Yeah. I don't know what else there is.
Well, I think that's one of the big things that I take to heart and that I hear you say too, is that like, your true self. And obviously that's usually a work in progress still, right? We're still constantly learning. Like I'm in process. I'm not ever, going to arrive at this point, but like, man, I feel like I know me. I didn't know who the heck I was till like I was like 32. So I finally like gave up.
That's
like
early.
Numbing out, and so it's awesome to be able to live in that, even though it's not easy all the time. It's it can be tough some days. But
we always have growing pains, right?
Yeah,
like that doesn't change. If you're not experiencing some growing pains, I don't think you're trying hard enough.
Yeah, that's true. You're not stepping out. You got to get uncomfortable a little bit, A little bit. Gotta be a little bit uncomfortable.
There's got to be like a safety zone, right?
Yeah.
Like there's got to be some balance, but it's not a razor's edge. It's a path, this balance thing. It's like you have to be pushing kind of hard, but you also have to take good care and rest. And there's a lot of paradoxes in recovery, but it's like you don't have to figure it out is not a slogan, right? It's not a slogan because the path is already defined.
Yeah.
And if you stay in the middle of the herd, as they say, and you connect to a higher power of some kind, it could be just the group. If you don't, I love me some science, and I love how science is kind of catching up or making sense of religion or spirituality in a lot of ways, but the path is defined. And if you just take a few, we like to complicate things, right?
Oh yeah.
But it's actually pretty simple. It's just fighting our nature to complicate things, I think, is the challenging part.
And I think like everyone's different too. Everyone learns different. Everyone has different beliefs and thoughts and experiences. And so like back to the point we were talking about earlier about not giving up, like the more you're kind of trying new avenues, like eventually something's going to click, like something's going to fall into place that works for you and that person. But we have the foundation, of many different programs, many different, experiences, all that we can kind of fall back on. I want to hear a little bit about ODATT Chat Podcast now, and how it started. I think you said, hold on, I'm gonna bring it up right now. 100. Oh wait, where I lost it there. How many? 124
121 episodes. Yeah.
Oh, 121. It says 124 on here. I wonder if that's like a.
Oh, you know what? I did a little series called Step Work Calls.
Oh, nice. That's cool.
And I didn't really count them as episodes. So I guess technically there's more than that, but I did like these little, I thought, I wonder if it would be helpful to show people what it would be like to work steps. And so I had these women.
That's a good idea.
I had this thing where I called for volunteers on the podcast, and all these people responded saying that they'd be willing to work steps. And then some problems came out of that.
Really? Imagine that.
Yeah. I thought, so what I learned, I think what would have been more helpful is if I did recorded all the steps and then published them all at once, because then when we got to like the 4 step, people were like, they were supposed to be doing the step work anonymously.
Oh,
right. Wow. So that they could be transparent, but then they were telling everybody that they were on this podcast. And then when we got to the 4th step, they couldn't be honest.
Because they were on the podcast, which made it difficult.
They told everybody who they were.
Oh yeah, that could be a little challenging.
It was problematic. It was problematic. It was a good experiment, but anyway, I have 121 like this style of interview.
Do you find that the podcast has it helped you in your recovery? Is it a big part of your just life in general?
Yeah. So here was the funny thing. Like I had a really hard time because I was so indoctrinated to, steps and traditions of not being public, maintaining anonymity at the level of press, radio, and film type of thing. I was so indoctrinated. I was terrified to do the podcast. And then a friend of mine was at a meeting. I used to attend this 6 a.m. meeting called ODATT. And I went to the 6 a.m. meeting every fucking day because that's where, if you're showing up at a meeting every day at 6 a.m., you are serious about your recovery. You're
committed. Yeah.
You are committed. And it sort of attracted like this, I dare say, high caliber of people, but people really commit. Such a loving group. It was huge to my recovery. But my girlfriend was there at 6 a.m. in the morning and she died 3 hours later in a single car wreck. And she and I were just about the same age. And I had already done a high-tech sales podcast. It was my first podcast. And it was really on my heart that I do this recovery podcast because that's really where I feel like my superpower is in like the recovery, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, totally.
But I was so conflicted. And then when Gina died, I was like, you know what? It would be such a regret for me to die with this dream on my heart. Like I felt like it was a dream that was given to me. Do you know what I mean? It was like, and so I was like, okay, that's it. I'm going to do it. So I was inspired to do it because of a tragedy, but I've had magical experiences. And one of my most impactful stories is that my second guest was my friend Katie. And Katie was just such a bright light in my life. And Katie had lost her kids. She told her story on the podcast, but she had lost her kids because of her drug use. Her sister told her ex-husband that she was using again and she lost custody of her children. And but she had gotten sober and she was riding high on sobriety like we do. And she got sick. She got sick with the flu. This is way before COVID. But she got sick with the flu and she died suddenly. 2 weeks after her 40th birthday.
Dang,
and she had
young.
everything going for her. She had everything going for her. And it was just such a tragic loss. Like I've never been so shook in my whole life. But her sister had heard the podcast episode after she died and she got a hold of me. And on the podcast, Katie talked about how she had forgiven her sister, and her sister reached out to me and said, I listened to her episode and I didn't know that she had forgiven me until she heard that podcast episode. And it just, Shane, it meant so much to me that like this was an unintended benefit of doing the podcast, that it meant something to someone else. Like you do the podcast and you hope it helps somebody, but you never know how it's going to help, right? Like I'm sure you get letters and stuff all the time, but you just never know how it's going to impact somebody. And that's why I keep going, because I just never know, like if you have a dream on your heart, you should follow it, because you just never know how your actions are going to help somebody else, and how it matters. Like what you do matters.
Yeah, that's good. That's amazing too, this story. I mean, you're literally getting a message beyond, in a sense, that she never knew, and you were able to kind of capture that moment by being of service and doing what you love to do, so it's pretty awesome.
Yeah, it was pretty cool.
What about you also? So and folks, check out ODATT Chat Podcast. I'll put all the show notes in here if you haven't checked it out already, and it's at Arlina Allen at ODATT Chat on Instagram. I'll put those links in there. But you also have a class called Reinvent, and I wanted to, before we wrap up, we just got a couple of minutes. I just want to hear a little bit about Reinvent. Where can folks find out more info if they want about that?
Yeah, so Reinvent is a self-esteem class, and the whole premise of the class is that we only allow into our lives what we feel we deserve. And those of us who have been through addiction experiences, we have a lot to overcome, right? There's a lot of guilt and shame that's associated with, living that life of alcoholism and drug addiction. There's a lot of, built-in guilt and shame there. And so the whole class is geared towards, it's a workshop for women at this point. I plan to do one that's open to men and women, but right now it's for women, where we really get to those limiting beliefs and we reframe those. And it's through a process where you show up to class and do the work in class, because lack of information is not the issue. It's applying that information to your life. That is the tricky part, right? And so the class is geared so that you actually do the work in class, right? And so the work gets done. We do a meditation, we do a bunch of writing exercises. There's a built-in sort of community that kind of develops within there. And there's a new class starting in October. I usually have one about once every 6 weeks. And so the next class will be towards the end of October, but you can register for the class or find out more information at selfesteemcourse.com.
Selfesteemcourse.com. Cool. I just put the link here down in the show notes. So folks, if you want to check that out, you can do that there. Arlina, just want to say thank you, number one, for coming on the show. Thank you for just being a good member of service, just to the recovery community, the podcast community, just in general too. It's so crazy. And shout out to Dennis again for kind of even though we had chatted before, I don't believe things happen by accident. And so, it's been really good to kind of connect again and have you on the podcast and all that good stuff. So thank you. Last question. If there's someone struggling right now and they just, they're not really sure, what advice can you give them?
I would say, number one, you are not alone. You are not alone, and there is hope. There's so many online resources now that are available. There's all kinds of podcasts. Feed your brain, ask for help. You can't see your ass and your face at the same time. Set aside your pride and just let somebody know that you're suffering. There are those of us who, we get you're kind of crazy. You can't scare us. We can help.
Yeah, that's good. One more time, where can folks reach out to you at?
They can find me through the podcast. It's ODAAT Chat.com. I didn't think it through when I named my podcast. I know some people spelled ODAT, ODAT. Damn it, if I had only known. Yeah. But through the podcast. Original. I have a Facebook page, the ODATT Chat Podcast. I'm very excited.
Good stuff. Yeah, and I'll put all that stuff in the show notes, folks. Arlina, thank you again for coming on today. Appreciate you. I hope something spoke to you today. Thank you for showing up. That's one of my favorite lines, just show up. So continue to do that. I'll do my best to do the same. Share the podcast with a friend. You can check us out at thatsoberguy.com. Once again, connect with us on Instagram at RealThatSoberGuy, on Twitter at Shane Raymer. Peace, love, and respect. I love you guys. Keep your blood clean.